Hi, good morning to all. I would like to, I hear a very strong echo. Yes, which now should be solved. So welcome to this webinar on service delivery models. My name is Iris, I work for IDH and I will be hosting this webinar. And the purpose of the webinar is to explain the methodology to you and its purpose. And we organized this webinar because we're keen to see whether we can create new partnerships for case analysis, whether we can actually work on improving service delivery models, whether we can unlock finance for testing new innovations, and whether we can establish a learning community. So what are we going to do in the coming hour? We will explain more in detail about the methodology of our work on service delivery models. We will also share with you what we learned so far and what we're planning to do coming year. My colleague Johnny Brom, who's the director for Innovative Finance, will explain to you how the methodology was used for the deal with Barry Callebaut and IFC. My other colleague Bernd Isenberg, who's working for the Fresh and Ingredients program, will explain how the Cashew program has integrated the methodology in their strategy. At the end of the session, there will be opportunities for questions and answers, and you may have seen in the tool that there is a Q&A box. Please use it as soon as you have a question and it pops up. We will try to accommodate your questions during the presentations. If not possible, we will accommodate them after the presentations. There's also a chat function which you can use for giving feedback to the hosts, my colleagues, on technicalities, but also you can share comments in the chat function as well. Please feel free to use it. Of course, this is a bit of a distant methodology of being in contact, so use the Q&A and chat, please, to give us feedback. So let's start with the methodology. So what is it about? And maybe for some of you, you're still figuring out on what is a service delivery model. A service delivery model is a structure in which services are being provided to smallholder farmers. And these can be different types of services. It can be training, inputs, financing, processing, marketing. Such services are provided by a service provider who, in many cases, in return receives products from the farmers. And service providers can be different types of organizations. It can be traders, processors, it can be a farmer organization, an NGO, a government extension scheme. And in some of those service delivery models, there are also investors. This can be buyers that are buying the cocoa, buying the coffee. It also can be social investors or maybe more commercial investors. We see that there are a lot of stakeholders involved in this work and that they're evolving. So we see that processors, traders, value chain partners more and more see service delivery as part of their core business and not only as an activity for corporate social responsibility. We also see, slowly, but it's upcoming, that financial institutions, development banks, and social investors have an increased risk-taking appetite to be involved and to invest in service delivery models. Donors, who some have diminishing budgets, increasingly focus on best value for money and how to create a good return on investment for their grant budgets. And we see innovative business emerging around service delivery model that, for example, work on traceability systems, mobile technology to drive down costs. So taking these trends into account and these stakeholders that are evolving, together with New Foresight, and Joost Gorte of New Foresight is also participating in this webinar, we developed a data-driven and a systemic methodology to analyze and optimize your service delivery model. So the first step is to understand. So you first, of course, need to understand what is going on, how is it performing. So this is this snapshot of your service delivery model. then you may want to dive deeper into a specific topic because you have been triggered by understanding how your model looks like. And as IDH, we're not so keen on only this understanding part. We see it as a first step. But what we're really keen about is to work with partners on designing and testing innovations to actually improve the performance of service delivery models. So I would like to take you through a few slides on what this understanding looks like. So this is the type of graphs that we develop with partners on how does the model look like. So what type of services are involved? Who's receiving the services? What are the stakeholders? And as important, who's paying for what? If we have a first understanding about how things look like, then we develop insight into the baseline situation at farmer level. And what is the effect if farmers are part of a service delivery model on their net income? We don't only look at the farmer level, but we also look at the effect of service supply on the service provider itself. So this is an example of ecom in Tanzania. And so far, the service supply is not profitable yet. There is an outlook in the future with an upscaling that it can become profitable. Besides looking at the effect on the service provider, we also the analysis also allows you to understand how receptive your model is for internalities, but also for externalities like changes in price. So what if the effect of fertilizer is higher? What's then the result on the net income? What if it's lower? So this is a very first idea on how the picture looks like. So an important reason to analyze your service delivery model is this part of understanding. So you get a holistic overview, you get a real good insight into the business case for operating a model, but also for a farmer to be part of the model, and what are the risks and opportunities using the sensitivity analysis. But understanding is a starting point. It also allows you to improve, so to deep dive into specific topics and to work with organizations like IDH on prototyping efficiency improvements. We have seen that a lot of those service delivery models have been developed quite in isolation, and that quite some organizations at small scale are reinventing wheels. So we think there's a lot to learn by sharing between private sector players, and between different geographies and crops. And doing such an analysis also will allow you to communicate. So to communicate what is your model about, and also what is the actual impact at farmer level. So I want to explain a little bit to you on what the process involves and what do you get out of it at the end. The process of doing an individual analysis of service delivery model starts with a kickoff, with expectation settings, planning, what are key learning questions for the case owner. Then we start with the snapshot. That was the graph that you have seen before on the overview of the model. Next phase is data collection, testing of assumptions, analysis, data collection at levels of the case, but also at national level. A field visit is optional, can be helpful to discuss outcomes face-to-face with the teams on the ground and to verify data. The final stage is the development of a case report, which has both a public and a private version. This case reports is one of the deliverables. The case owner has the right to indicate what can be shared in the public domain. The other key deliverable is an Excel tool, which is used for doing the analysis and which can be continuously used by a case owner for monitoring and evaluation of the performance of the model, but also for you to play around with it and to tweak it and see how you can further improve a service delivery model. What have we done so far? Well, we started with 3 cases, which is phase 1, to see whether our whole thinking could work. After this phase, we were able to further refine the methodology and do another round of cases with key partners in coffee, cocoa, and with one partner in spices. We also we're planning to do more, and I will explain more to you in the later part of this presentation. Since this is a distant tool, I also have questions for you. So I hope you are a little bit awake and that you paid attention to a few of the previous slides. So my question to you is, what are the most important ways? So having a bit insight in what the methodology is about, how could the methodology benefit your organization? And if technology works, you should see a poll now where you can actually vote. You have several votes, so if you think it can support you in several ways, you can click more than one option. And if you feel that you want to share a comment with us because you have specific ideas, or maybe you don't think it can benefit your organization, please share a comment with us in the chat box, or put a question in the Q&A. And we see that 7 of you have put in your vote. So if any other would like to put in your vote, please, there are a few seconds remaining where you can share what you think. And your response is that there is a lot of interest to learn from others, and that's something I'm very happy about, that there's also a lot of interest to actually improve your service delivery model. So if you have concrete ideas about it, either share it in the chat or send me a message. Since we have done a couple of cases, we also have some learnings which we would like to share with you. So having done a number of cases in coffee and cocoa, there are some key outcomes which we would like to share with you. First key outcome is that besides that companies are focusing on farmer profitability, on farmer productivity, there's more and more attention also to the farmer profitability. So we see that companies see a need to accommodate the cash flow needs of farmers outside, for example, the key cash crop season. So you will see an example of Ecom in Tanzania, who started to work in sesame to offer farmers an alternative source of cash income outside the coffee season. So they actually can pay their school fees and they don't need to sell coffee in advance to local traders, local moneylenders. The second outcome is that we see that farmers are seen more and more as clients instead as only as beneficiaries of service delivery models, and that there's a trend towards using farmer segmentation and making service tailor-made. We also see that there's a clear outcome that for this type of business, long-term investments are needed, both for the setup of the service delivery model as well as for investments at farm level in rejuvenation. We also see that there's an increased understanding that if these models want to exist on the long term, thoughts need to be put in on how to best finance it and what are the different ways of financing it. And we learned that data is crucial, which may be a no-brainer, but data at farmer level proved to be quite scarce. The good thing is that we see that companies are investing more and more in data collection. We have a small video for you to maybe even wake you up further on what our partner shared during a learning event earlier this year in May. It's a short video.
We're looking at thriving farming communities. As a company, we're dependent on farmers supplying us with their products. At the same time, farmers are also depending on us for having outlets to markets, to competitive markets. So maintaining that relationship and ensuring that farming communities thrive is in our interest and is a core part of our sustainability strategy.
We were looking into improvements for our farmers, and we were finding out that they don't have money at the time they need money. This caused them to sell some of the crop. And we're trying to figure out and to work out with farmers a way of increasing their income. And here we found out that sesame exactly falls into a time frame where the farmer would not have any money. And we've continued now in the second year to promote the sesame. We found now some clients who are interested in sesame. And since it's more lucrative for our farmers if we export it direct instead of selling it in the local market, we also bridged this gap to increase the income by exporting it.
Constant validation of data that we use to assume and fine-tune our business model. Certainly, we need to make sure that we're not forgetting about all the innovation. As we're innovating, we shouldn't forget the fact that we're also rolling out the business with farmers as customers that we need to serve as good as possible. So it's really, rolling the basic model out, scaling it, and at the same time innovating to the extent possible in new business model. The two things we came out of this work was really, first, we gained confidence that working with cooperative and farm organization is really the best way to go. Because through farm organization, we can really upscale it, because it's impossible to address the service delivery model to millions of farmers. But going through a couple of farm organizations who are themselves touching a lot of farmers is really efficient. Because by having skills, we can better negotiate on behalf of farmers about inputs, planting material. We can organize nursery for big scales and reach some really effective cost and give them a better deal. Because at the end, everything relates to value creation at the farmer level.
Okay, I think technique was partly working, partly not working. It's also on YouTube, so we can share the link with you. It's quite a nice short movie on what our partners see as key outcomes. We know that there's also a lot that we don't know yet, and a few of our key learning questions is what drives adoption, and how can you improve loyalty rates? So we know that farmer profiles are being used, but not at large scale yet. So how to best use those? A very important one: how do you drive down costs, both for farmers as well as for service operators? And how do you do this financing of a service delivery model? Where do you need grants? Where can you use concessional finance? Where can you use commercial finance? And what is actually the role of an enabling environment? Can a service delivery model work anywhere? Or do you actually need a facilitating enabling environment? I have 3 more questions for you. The first one is another poll. So the outcomes that we shared, which of those outcomes resonate with you? So which one is most significant? And if you think, actually, I don't recognize anything, please leave a comment for us in the chat box or a question in the Q&A. I have a few seconds for you to Okay, cool. So it's pretty interesting to see. So I think there's a big winner in the sense that you really recognize farmer profitability as a company driver. So increased attention for that farmers are diversified, that that's also cash flow needs matter. So that's nice to see. Another question for you is on the learning questions. Which of those learning questions are most interesting for you? And please feel free and feel very Dutch to give us comments if you think we're actually missing a key question. Okay, thanks for your response. I think there's another very clear winner, which is on how to drive adoption and loyalty rates. Adoption is a topic we will do more work on, so I'm happy if you're interested in to work on that with us. Then if later on you think we're missing something, please let us know. Then what are we going to do next? So the plans for the future is that we would like to do more action-driven analysis. So we want to broaden the scope of the service delivery models that we analyze in different sectors, in different countries, and also in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we also want, at the end of next year, to establish a dedicated innovation program and a fund to co-design and co-fund innovative solutions that actually put it in practice on the ground. And we also think it will be helpful to develop insights for financial institutions for them to start working more and more in financing service providers. Besides the action-driven analysis, we also further want to build on the learning community. So as I just said, we would like to do deeper analysis, for example, on farmer segmentation. We actually already started on that, and on adoption. We want to convene key partners on pre-competitive topics through these type of means of a webinar, but also through face-to-face events with partners. So we plan to organize the next event in September next year. And we're looking for strategic partnerships with knowledge partners for whom this topic is also a real interesting topic, and they like to share experience and knowledge with us. So now I'd like to give you my last poll, then I'm not going to bother you anymore with polls. So if you're interested to work with us, where would you like to work with us? So, and there are more options possible. Also, again, feel free to give comments on if you would like to work with us in a different area. Okay, thanks very much. It's interesting to see that there's quite some interest in the learning community, but I would say equal interest in developing innovations and the actually financing of service delivery models, which is also a natural moment to go to my colleague Johnny, who will explain more to you about the work that we did with Barry Calabout.
Good. Hi, everyone. Johnny here. Let me talk you through a few slides about the Barry Calabout deal we did, and the SDM was an essential part of that. Essentially, it was a financing deal together with Barry Callebaut, IFC, and ourselves. Just quickly, a brief overview of the actual project. Barry Callebaut wanted to change their sourcing model by significantly ramping up their relationship with their third-party suppliers, cooperatives, and then directly with smallholder farmers. The project was to provide technical assistance, but also what is referred to in cocoa as productivity packages, excuse me, to these suppliers. Productivity packages meaning all the inputs, fertilizer, agrochemicals, etc., and to do so on credit as opposed to just cash and carry, therefore significantly enhancing the potential for these farmers to access this offering and invest in their farms. IDH and IFC played a role as a risk-sharing partner in this deal, and I'll explain that in a sec. The project aims to reach over 100,000 farmers by 2020 with outstanding loans of over 25 million. We go to the next slide. For BC, the insights of the model were quite prevalent. It was a pivotal part of the success of this actual offering. Through the modeling process, it became clear that the productivity package is great, but it's really just the first step, as the effects of the tree age is such a significant factor when we're looking at productivity and profitability of these smallholder farmers. Hence, instead of a huge boost in income that we expected, it became clear that this project was just really a transition into a replanting one. The SDM allowed BC to look at service delivery in a much more holistic approach, i.e. taking into account what is needed on their end as well to make the service delivery more viable from their side. As a co-financier, for IDH, this is also a very specific, very important part, i.e. we don't want to be financing a project which is not sustainable for the actual company as well. It needs to stand on its own feet over time, and this more holistic approach, rather than just looking at the farmer side, but also looking at it from the business perspective, was a critical part of adapting the service delivery model to make sense from over the long term. Through this SDM work, we were able to have much more of a focus on this sort of service delivery part as opposed to just the farmer level impact. And when you start modeling out these cash flows and the true costs, which is what the SDM did, it becomes clear that for an SDM to become sustainable, with initial costs being so unclear, there's a need for risk-sharing partners to make it work. So if you're looking at financing an SDM in the initial phase, the first 5 years, maybe longer, you need risk-sharing partners to make the model work, or in many cases. Just briefly on how the risk sharing was arranged, it was a 50-50 split between Barry Callebaut and then IDH and IFC on the other side of that. The three partners essentially providing a guarantee over the full project, i.e. taking the risk of the farmers defaulting on their loans, but providing this guarantee to the local subsidiaries of Barry Callebaut, Sacco and Biopartner. The actual funding coming from local banks and to these companies against their balance sheet. This waterfall structure with IDH and BC taking a first loss position allows an international bank like IFC to step into this kind of a deal, something rather unusual for them, taking direct smallholder farmer risk, of course. Although not showing in this diagram, the farmers also had skin in the game as they were requested to put up a 20% cash collateral through a savings account with a local MFI advance. In terms of value creation, it's pretty much at two levels, as I spoke to earlier. There's the farmer, and then there's the actual service delivery provider, which is Barry Callebaut. At the farmer level, it's quite clear. There's bankability and sustainability of their actual farming practice. So that financial track record over a couple of years, the thesis of this project is that over 3 or 4 years, the farmers can actually transition to receiving the credit from the local MFI instead of through this channel, because of the fact that they have this financial track record through this risk-sharing agreement and through the service delivery model. They have an operating track record through their offtake with Barry Callebaut, and of course they've built up that savings discipline because of the cash collateral they had to put in. At the level of Barry Callebaut, there's clearly a comparative advantage for them in this kind of service delivery to suppliers. Ira spoke about adoption and loyalty earlier. This increases their attractiveness to these farmers. And on top of that, very importantly, it's a project which is or will become financially sustainable for them, and therefore significantly more scalable, i.e. the actual service delivery also makes financial sense over the medium term. And then, of course, the big plus for them is the increased access to sustainable cocoa. if we go to the final slide, from my side, the next steps are clear. The SDM, when we modeled it and we realized the importance of replanting, it became clear that the next step for us would really be turning that into an actual financial structure and financing the next phase, which is long-term replanting of these smallholder farmers. The SDM is the key part of that. Again, trying to look at farmer level impact and matching that to service delivery sustainability will be a key part going forward. And for that, different types of partnerships with financial institutions are needed. As we go forward, and because we're already in a project and we've already started financing these farmers, there's ongoing monitoring of the SDM and tweaking of how to improve it in terms of this first phase. I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, please jump on the chat box and we can respond.
Okay, thanks, Johnny, for explaining how the SDM methodology was helpful in the work with Bali Calabout and IFC. I would like now to hand over to Bernd, who will explain a bit more on how this methodology is being used in another program of IDH for Cashew.
Right. Good morning, everyone. This is Bernd speaking. I hope you can hear me. So I'd like to talk you through why and how we use the SDM analysis in the Cashew program of IDH. I'd like to start with why we use those SDM studies in the first place. To give you a bit of context, traditionally processors buy cashews from middlemen unaware of the origin of the produce and unable to improve production. So they typically buy cashews in bulk in a container and have absolutely no idea where those cashews are coming from exactly. And the IDH Cashew program supports such processors in Africa in sourcing cashews directly from farmers and tracing these volumes. So instead of just buying cashews in bulk at the market, processors now have a completely different role, going straight to the farmer and sourcing cashews from them. And that's obviously is a completely new setup for the entire supply chain. And we need SDM studies to assess the economic viability of this structural change for processors and farmers, since at this point in time, we don't know whether this is profitable for processors nor for farmers. So the SDM studies were put in place to enable IDH to better target its investments, to enable processors in IDH to improve direct sourcing models, and thirdly, to prove the profitability of direct sourcing from smallholders to facilitate scaling and rollout of this model of direct sourcing to the entire sector. So how exactly do we use the SDM studies? In the beginning of each project, we do an SDM study to refine the intervention strategy and to establish a baseline. So how does the project approach farmers, and where's the benefit for farmers in that, and how can we increase that benefit maybe? And then annually, we do updates of the SDM tool to monitor changes in profitability for both processors and farmers, also with the aim to sharpen our interventions. And then in the end, the SDMs are supposed to test 3 hypotheses. The first one being direct sourcing can reduce sourcing costs for processors. That's the main aim of all of the processors involved in our program. Secondly, the farmers have to benefit from the services provided. Otherwise, those services would not be sustainable in the long run. And then thirdly, that's a point that's very important, and that also came out of the earlier poll as being very important to you. How do we increase farmer loyalty using these service delivery models? That's an answer that we hope to get out of the service delivery model studies as well. And then let me just quickly conclude actually what's in it for the IDH Cashew program. As I said already, first it's to refine our smallholder strategy and to invest and to adjust our interventions in the projects, but also for the program as a whole. Secondly, we would like to prove the business case of cashew processors being able to efficiently source cashews directly from smallholders. Also use that across sectors as a business case example that we can roll out to other sectors and other companies. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly, we want to stimulate a change of thinking in the sector. Farmers, whereas before they were somewhere in the dark of the sector where nobody really knew what was happening, so they were faceless suppliers that now need to become clients of the processors that require an attractive proposition to be retained and not simply a hard bargaining. Processors need to realize that investments in farmers need to show a return of investment beyond image improvement and market access. So the profitability at farmer level and at processor level needs to be clear for this to be sustainable. And thirdly, for IDH, we see this, or for the IDH Cashew program in particular, we see this as an opportunity to establish ourselves as a learning and innovation partner that can help improve the business models of cashew companies, both in Africa and in Europe. All right, that's it from my side, and I'll give it back to Aris.
Yes, thanks, Bernd. Thanks very much. So there's more to learn about our work on service delivery models on our renewed website, which you see here. But I would now really would like to give the floor to you to ask questions. You can only do it through the tool, which hopefully you feel comfortable on sharing questions if you have any. We are aware that the tool we're using doesn't allow you to speak. It's not that we don't want you to speak, but that's how the technical system has been set up. So please feel free if you have any questions, either for me, for Johnny on the side of the finance and the structure with the deal with Barry Callebaut, or to Bernd on why the Cashew program is using this methodology. And I hope it's not too early for you, or whether we have either blown you away and it has been very clear, or you have been got very bored for this webinar. So please let us know if there are any questions that you would like to share with us. And in the meantime, we will pull up our last poll on what you thought about this, to at least get your feedback on. For us, this is a relatively new mean on how to share some insights and some experiences. So you can give us feedback on, or we like to get your feedback on whether this was interesting, whether you would like to whether you would be interested in similar type of webinars, and okay, I see that we got one question in via the chat from Sabrina. Her question is whether we share calls for proposals on SDM model innovations in coming weeks or coming month. I think that's a very relevant question. Thanks for asking that. So what we're doing is will work in coming months on the development of this innovation program and fund. And as we are developing it, we would be keen to get partners who are interested in this in contact with us to see whether this whether that could lead to interesting pipeline, which could be used for the program and or for the fund. So it won't be an openly communicated call for proposals, but we will. But we are definitely very much interested to hear of interest of partners to work on the service delivery models. And there's a question from Mark from Rainforest Alliance. He's asking to get an idea of scale. What is the average dollar amount provided under the SDM to each farmer in the case of cocoa and in the case of cashew? So Mark, the cases of cashew, we're just starting. So therefore I can't give you an answer yet. And the dollar amount in cocoa, that varies greatly, because in different cocoa models, different types of services are being provided. So we, for example, looked at the costs of training / coaching, and there you see a big range. I'm also now looking at Joost, what this range was, but if I recall correctly, it's somewhere between $4 per farmer per year until $30 to $40 per farmer per year. And that's for training. We also, in cocoa, some of the models also included nurseries, fertilizer on credit. When you look at fertilizers that have been provided to farmers, there's also a huge variation, both in coffee and cocoa. So it ranges between $30 per hectare to $300 or over $300 per hectare. And that difference is mainly explained because not all farmers use fertilizer for their whole hectare. So some farmers use fertilizer only for a couple of trees. Some farmers are being advised to use it for a full hectare. There are huge variations, and in the report we released, you can also find, instead of trusting on my memory, you can find those figures and see the comparison between different cocoa service delivery models, but also the comparison with different coffee service delivery models. And I got a short message from Sabrina that the Pearl project is interested. So I'm happy to get in touch with you, Sabrina, on that. Any other questions that pop in your mind, or where you think, this was not fully clear to me yet on what we're working on? Okay, then I think one more question of my colleague, of our colleague Cyril. He's asking, how would you be able to validate the data for building a viable SDM if field visit is not compulsory but optional? That's a very good question. So you should see this methodology not as an audit. So it's a methodology to gain insight into the performance of the service delivery model, where we expect that partners also benefit most if they're transparent with the data that is available and share the data that's available. So if a field visit is not part of the analysis, then it's not possible to verify data in the field, but we expect partners, for their own interest as well, to be transparent in sharing data. Because in the end, on the long run, not sharing the right data, I don't think it will benefit neither the service provider itself, because you're creating a more rosy picture of reality, and it will definitely not benefit farmers. Okay, then I think we will round off for this first webinar. Thanks for getting your feedback on what you thought about the webinar, and thank you very much for participating. I'm looking forward to being in contact with those who feel this is an interesting topic. My details can be found in the slide deck, but also you probably have my details for the invite for the webinar itself. Okay, thanks very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.